A young woman driving home on a rural road in the early hours of the morning would unfortunately meet incredible evil that night. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just so strange happenings in the world, you've come to the right place. If you'd like to support the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss video upload. Let's get started. Stephanie Roper was a 22-year-old student who had been attending Frostburg State University. She was not only beautiful and intelligent, but she was incredibly close with her family, and she was also an artist who loved to paint. During the early morning hours of April 3rd, 1982, Stephanie, who was home on a college break, was returning from an evening with friends at a West End, Washington, D.C. bar known as the 21st Amendment. After dropping her friends off, Stephanie proceeded toward home, but soon her car would become disabled on a dark rural stretch of the highway. As Stephanie steps out of her vehicle, she realizes that she has 3 flat tires. And remember, this is 1982, long before our cell phones were a permanent part of our lives. As this poor young woman is trying to get home, she's now stuck on this really kind of long and rural stretch of the highway. It's very early in the morning, it's dark. She must have been petrified as is. That's when 2 men who had been driving by pulled over to assist Stephanie. Stephanie would tell these men that her friend lived just about 5 minutes down the road and asked if they would give her a ride. And the men would reassure her that it was no trouble at all. The men who pulled over to pick up Stephanie were 26-year-old Jack Ronald Jones and 17-year-old Jerry Lee Beatty. Jerry Beatty would later claim that him and Jack Jones had been drinking heavily and using drugs such as marijuana, PCP, and speed for several hours before they stumbled across Stephanie on that rural stretch of highway. Unfortunately, instead of taking her to her friend's home, as soon as Stephanie entered the vehicle with these men, they pulled out their guns and kidnapped the young woman. Jerry would later claim that they took turns raping her in the car and then proceeded to an abandoned house not far from Jack Jones' home. Over the next 5 hours, these men would torture, rape, and murder Stephanie, and they did so without mercy. During this prolonged torture session, one of the men blurted out his partner's name, and this was an unfortunate mistake. Suddenly, they were afraid that Stephanie would be able to identify them, and they decided that the best thing to do would be to kill her. One of the men would hit Stephanie with a heavy logging chain, which fractured her skull, and then Jones would fire a fatal shot that killed her. Unfortunately, it only gets more gruesome from there. Because these men were afraid that Stephanie would be identified, they would cut off her hands and burn her body. Of course, Stephanie's family would soon realize that the young woman was missing, and luckily, it didn't take police long to identify the 2 men who had harmed her that night. It appears that Beatty had gone around and was bragging about his crime to other people. Soon, both men would be charged with felony murder, rape, and kidnapping. They were both convicted and given 2 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after 12 years. The minimum of 12 years was later doubled when additional time was added to their original sentences. During the trial, everyone would soon learn just how horrifying the ordeal was. As all of this is happening to Stephanie, she's pleading and begging for her life, and she asked Jerry to please release her so she could return home to finish a painting that she had been working on. Jerry Lee Beatty, the 17-year-old who took part in this crime, would testify that he wanted to let her go, but feared that if he did let her go, his own life would be in jeopardy by Jack Ronald Jones. At one point, Jack had left the abandoned home and left her alone with Jerry, so he could have let her go. Jerry would go on to say, "She asked me if I was going to shoot her. I said no. She asked if Jack would shoot her. I said I didn't think he would. I figured he had had enough sense not to do anything like that. She asked if I could let her go. I said I wanted to, but I couldn't because I wouldn't know what was going to happen to me. I figured if I didn't do what Jones said, my life might be in danger. She said she wanted to go back home and finish a painting. That's all she said to me." Shortly after that, Jerry would say that Jones returned, hit her over the head with a logging chain, and gunned her down when she tried to escape. Jerry would also testify that he had accidentally uttered Jones's nickname, which was Bump. Jones would then turn to him and say, "You know what we're going to have to do? We have to shoot her." Jerry would go on to say, "No way, you can do whatever you want, but I ain't getting involved in that." Jerry would say that Stephanie did try to run away a second time after Jones hit her with the chain. He would say she grabbed her head with both hands and said, "What are you doing?" Jerry would say that he refused Jones's command to shoot her, and then Jones would grab the gun, overtake her, and shoot her. He would then pour gasoline over her body and light a match. Jerry Beatty would say that he doused the flames with water after a few minutes because he, quote, couldn't stand it no more. And then he would drag the body with Jones to a stump hole in a nearby swamp. He would say, "I told him I ain't never did anything like that before in my life." And he would say, "I ain't either." Jerry would say that him and Jack returned to the scene with a hatchet a day or so later, but, quote, changed his mind. Their mission was to get rid of her feet, her hands, and her head so that nobody could identify the body. He would claim that Jack later told him to go do the job, but he just couldn't do it. On Easter Sunday morning, Jerry said that Jones told him, quote, "I figured you wouldn't do it. I should have done it myself." Unfortunately, Stephanie's family wasn't allowed to observe the trial and was denied the opportunity to present a victim impact statement at sentencing. Stephanie's mother, Roberta, decided that she was going to solve this problem. She knew that families deserved the right to address the court before sentencing. She actively lobbied for this and won. It appears that Jerry is still in jail, while Jones is reported to have killed himself in prison. Stephanie's mother, Roberta, would go on to say, "Over the years, many people have asked me how I could do the work of an advocate, that it must be so challenging and depressing. My reply has been, how could I not do this work if I hope to survive? Yes, it has been the most challenging work of my life, but it is far from depressing. It has been the most rewarding work of my life because it has empowered victims to not only find hope and healing, but to become thriving survivors. It is work inspired by individuals who, despite the suffering and injustice they have endured, have courageously mustered the strength to survive with dignity and live happy and productive lives." Although many people remember Stephanie's last words about asking to go home so that she could finish a painting, many people remark that her final diary entry should be what is remembered. Her final entry stated, "Every person can make a difference, and every person should try." Stephanie's mother and family think about her every day. Roberta would say, "She has left a legacy that her family is most proud of. And you know, it's not just about Stephanie, it's about any American who suffers the undeserved consequences of criminal violence." This crime stuck out to me because this poor young woman is just driving home and she gets 3 flat tires. And she's on this rural stretch of highway. It's dark, it's scary. And then 2 men pull up and they offer her assistance. In under 2 minutes, she's in a car where she's being violently assaulted. And then she's taken elsewhere where she is met with death. I just can't imagine what was going through this poor girl's head. I feel like this is what bothers me about the case, is because she was in this really tricky situation. It's very early in the morning. She really doesn't have anybody to help her. She's on this rural highway. And the 2 people that do come along could have helped her and just taken her on that 5-minute drive and left her in safety with a friend. Instead, they chose to take a life for no real reason. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video and want to support the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop it in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to it. In the meantime, check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you then.